we'll have a period of reflection followed by questions and answers. So do please bear that in mind and send me your questions on the chat when you've got them, when you have some. The dedication of offerings and the refuges and precepts I'll share with you on the screen, so you can see them. You can join in if you wish, and being muted, that will be fine. That will work. And that's a traditional Theravada way to begin. It's certainly not compulsory to be in that way. It's a tradition, but it does bring our attention prepares us for meditation. I find quite well that when I go to the monastery, we do some chanting before the meditation, and it is a way of calming down. It's quite an interesting thing to bring your attention into the present moment, to pay attention, because our mind is, especially at the beginning of an evening, inclined to wander. So it's an opportunity to bring your attention back to that, to the words, and try to be in the present moment with them. And also it's an opportunity to reflect that why we're here, the three refuges of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the pillars of our, in a sense, the support that we have. Buddha's enlightenment, the Dhamma, his teaching, and the Sangha, those that have brought that teaching into practice and made it it has transcended, if you like, found it a transcendent experience from practicing it. And then the 5 precepts are establish our practice in sila, in morality. This is the beginning of calming the mind. When the mind's troubled with immorality, it's harder to calm down. So when we establish our ethical basis, the 5 precepts, it's a way to calm the mind. You might not connect the two, but that's there is a connection. And so we chant the 5 precepts. Of course, the precepts are we bring into daily life, and we recall them as we live from day to day. And so it's a reminder. It may be that you come to the Buddhist Society and once a week, and once a week you chant them, and that's a reminder, and that is something which can be sustained throughout your week until you come back and remember again. There are guidelines, they're training guidelines, they're aspirational rather than being rules to live by. They are developmental, and so it's really interesting to reflect on how we can bring them into our lives, and how they can be a tool. We can find that there can be a tool that we can really help support our practice in daily life. But they're not like if it's a rule, it can be like a burden, can make them into a burden. They're not like that. They're a tool that we should use in a skillful way to free ourselves from suffering. So, let's begin. To the Blessed One, the Lord who fully attained perfect enlightenment, to the teaching which he expounded so well, and to the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, to these the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, we render with offerings our rightful homage. It is well for us that the Blessed One, having attained liberation, still had compassion for later generations. May these simple offerings be accepted for our long-lasting benefit and for the happiness it gives us. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and Blessed One, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sangham saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Sangham saranang gacchami. Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. Adinna dana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kamesu michachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying. Sura Miriamajja Pamadatana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness. Imani Pancha Sikkhapadani Silena Sugatinyanti Silena Bhoga Sampada Silena Niputinyanti Tasma Silang Visodaye. These are the 5 precepts. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is the source of true wealth. Virtue is the source of peacefulness. Therefore let virtue be purified. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Meditation is about listening. Mindfulness is about listening. Listening, in order to listen, we have to understand the language. When we listen to the body, we listen to the language of the body. So what is the language of the body? The language of the body is sensation, it's touch. For all of the senses, each sense has a different language. And the language of the body is touch, which is sensation. When we bring our attention to the body, then we listen to that language, which is sensation, wherever sensation is felt. Perhaps the sensation of specific areas like contact to the breath at the nostrils, very precise, defined area, or perhaps to a specific place in the body where we feel tension, like behind the eyes, in the jaw, around the cheek, in the throat, at the back of the neck, or in the shoulders. We can direct our attention to the specific areas. Or we can notice the general experience of sitting. But even that's experienced through sensation. Not determining exactly where that sensation may be, but nevertheless, the sense of sitting upright is felt in different parts of the body through sensation. The sensation of having an upright posture is felt. Perhaps the muscles at the base of the spine as they hold the back upright. The sensation of relaxing the shoulders and finding a point of balance. So we begin our meditation listening to the language of the body. We have to learn that language. It may not come easily. So we have to give deliberate attention to make a connection with the sensations in the body. So it can be helpful to pay attention from the top of the head through to the soles of the feet. Deliberately noticing sensations in different parts of the body as we journey down to the soles of the feet and then work our way back up again. That's a way of connecting to that language. Listening to the body. When we're listening, we're not judging. We don't need to hold an opinion. Just listen. The language of the body is always in the present moment, isn't it? The sensations are happening now. When we listen to the sensations, that language, it's always in the present moment. That's why we use it. But attention in the body is helpful to calm down, calm the busy mind. So it can be helpful. Many people find it helpful to begin their meditation by giving attention to the body. Bringing our minds into the present moment. It can be difficult to experience thoughts in the present moment because the language of the mind is always in the future or the past. We're always, you could say, the language of the mind is next rather than now. It's what was rather than the present. It's the stories about the past or the future are not in the, don't bring us into the present. So we have to let them go. And we come into the present with the mind by understanding, by understanding the nature of those stories. The experience of the mind that's busy is to know it as the busy mind rather than to be carried away by the busyness of it. In the present moment, we can know the busy mind. That's now. But in the stories that's next, what's and more, and next, and next. It's always and next. So mindfulness comes with the need to let go. To be mindful, we need to let go of what's taking us out of the present moment. We get the context, we come into that understanding of the experience of our mind, whatever it might be. We know it as it is in the present. When we step out of the story, so we change the language of the mind from next into now in order to be in the present moment. And when the mind is in now, in the present moment, there's nowhere to go. You just stay here. There's nowhere to go towards or nothing to get away from. We simply stay in the present. The here and now, it's like this. We're not going anywhere. So we find quite easily, quite naturally, we give our attention to the body again. It's simply, that's breathing, isn't it? The mind becomes still, and what becomes apparent is the language of the body. The sensation of breathing, the sensation of sitting. Just noticing that. As the mind calms down. Coming into the present moment, the mind naturally calms down. When the mind gets carried away with thoughts of the past and the future, stories that come up in the mind, we call it the grasping mind. We're grasping this and that and recoiling from this and that. This is the human experience. It's not that there's something wrong with us. It's just not helping. The mind is doing its best, but it's not helping. The mind needs to be trained to step back time and time again, just to step back from the compulsive doingness of all of this. And the way to do that is to often it helps to label what the experience is. What is this? Is it restlessness? If it is, a label can help us get a context. Oh, it's the restless mind. That's what it is. If it's confusion, that's what it is. If it's desire, if it's greed, if it's hate and anger, whatever it is, if we can get a label, in a label, we can help get a context on what's going on and bring us out of the story that's creating it. So get a sense of understanding, perspective. Oh, yeah, that's what's going on. But then let that go. Don't hold on to it. Don't believe in it. We don't need to believe in these labels, but they can give us a clue, an idea of what's happening. Say it's just feeling really restless, then notice what that is. What's the experience of feeling restless? That's being in the present. Not believing in the label, but investigating the experience. Just like this. And all the time, willing to let go. Not adding fuel to the fire. Letting it run its course, whatever the experience is. Letting it cease in its own time. always bringing compassion and kindness and forgiveness into our practice. We're not criticizing the mind for being the way it is. It's how it is. We're just knowing, learning, understanding, listening to the language of the mind. If it's next, it's next. We can let it go and bring it into the now. Let it be present, fully seen in the present moment. It's a compassionate act. It's not being critical. We're not judging the mind. We're watching, learning, and developing the mind. Learning to listen. Discovering what it has to teach us. Not through ideas and views and opinions, but through understanding its true nature, the way it is. Ding. 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 So, I just thought I'd reflect on the language of the mind. So, reflecting on the language of the mind, it occurs to me there are two languages. There's the language of next, and there's the language of now. And I guess the language of next has to include it's really the past and the future, the stories around the past and the stories around the future. But and they're really experienced through that feeling of and next, and next. And you can really investigate these stories using a little mantra like that, and next. It can be a way to reflect on the mind. So whatever comes up, something comes up in the mind, you think it can be next, and then you can start to see what's happening, what's the story about. I remember this morning I was meditating, and an image came up in my mind. I was driving down a road which forked into two. And the right fork led to the retreat that I'm leading at the weekend. And so when I used this reflection, this thought came in my mind, and next, because I knew there's a story about to develop here. There's the story. I'm going to start to think about, oh, what am I going to do? What should I do? It's before I know what, I could have made up a whole story about it. Oh, maybe I haven't planned it. Maybe I should be thinking about it. Maybe, I don't know. And I just didn't bother with that. What came to mind was, oh, and next. And immediately I thought, oh yeah, this is a story I'm going to create that I don't need to. That's the language of next. So what is next? What is this language? It's the language of the grasping mind. Yeah. The mind that is trying to get somewhere, get away from something, and become something. The grasping mind is, you could say, talk about grasping sense desire, sense contact, sense desire, or becoming, or not becoming, grasping views and opinions. So there's a grasping there. We call it the grasping mind. And that's the normal experience. We experience the grasping mind. Perhaps it's the only language we know. Perhaps we don't know any other language than that. We're so familiar with it, we don't question it. We never really investigate it, never really understand that that's what it is. And the only way to understand, to get this perspective, is to experience now. To start to tune into this other language, the language of now, the present moment. Because it's only from that present moment experience that we can understand, we can really understand the grasping mind. We can't see it when we're in it, if you see what I mean. It's like we're in the swamp, when you're underneath, or in the long grass, you can't see anything. So you can't see it. You have to get out of it somehow to see it for what it is. So Buddhist meditation is to cultivation of mindfulness, it's in order to see the grasping mind, to understand it clearly. That's why mindfulness comes with letting go, because how do you see the grasping mind unless you can first let go? You have to let go. When you see it, the letting go comes along with that. So with mindfulness, let's say noticing that moment where you've taken that turning and they're heading off in that direction, and you can see that the story is going to develop, and I'm going to start to create a story about this. Then there's a stepping back. That's mindfulness coming into play, isn't it? Say, oh, that's what's happening. This is next. That's the next. And that stepping back into the present moment comes with seeing, clarity, a clarity of mind. Sati comes with sampajanya. You get mindfulness, which is sati, and sampajanya is clear seeing. So the two go hand in hand, but in a sense, the sati happens first. You step back and then you see. And there's that stepping back comes with a willingness to let go. We have to step out the grasping mind. We have to let go of the grasping itself in order to see. Otherwise, we're just carried along with it by the stream of desire, sense desire, or becoming this and that, trying to get rid of this and that, or holding on to views and opinions. And the mind just sucked into this intellectual mind game. It's like a dream world, isn't it? We're sucked into a dream world. Or another way of looking at it is like being born into. We're continually being born into these, let's say, the pleasant sense experience, or even just sense contact, desperate for sense contact. When people talk about they're desperate for the lockdown to come to an end, because they're desperate to hug and be hugged. This tactile contact with other people. It's an understandable thing. That you can see how there's almost like being born into that experience, that contact. We're desperate for contact with the world. And in a sense, and also with becoming, we're desperate to become this and that, to become successful, perhaps, to become a nice person, to become somebody who people will respect, to become somebody who doesn't get respect, but who's known anyway, whatever it's for, as long as somebody notices us, as long as, people have an opinion about us, tweet, 10 tweets, just so that we get a reaction. Not that I do, but we're desperate for that to exist in the world. And so we feed on that, on sense desire. We feed on the grasping mind. It's like a feeding frenzy. And we may never have noticed, we may never have questioned that. So mindfulness is the opportunity to see, to step back and to see and understand. And the purpose of this is to understand the mind, isn't it? We do mindfulness to understand the mind, to see how it works. So that's the language, just a reflection about the language of the mind. Perhaps there are two languages. Perhaps there's the language of now and the language of next. And that we're cultivating the language of now. So what is the language of now? It's the knowing that this is the restless mind, knowing that this is doubt and confusion, knowing that this is anger, just knowing. It's recognizing and bringing that into the present. The present moment comes with that clarity of mind, a willingness to investigate. So we may not know it immediately, but we're willing to learn. So mindfulness, you could say, is that willingness to learn. It's not just about noticing, it's the willingness to learn. If mindfulness was just about noticing the flowers, the trees coming into, it's not just noticing, it's a willingness to, what can we learn? What can we investigate, we look at the nature, but not just to notice through, not just, mindfulness isn't just noticing and nothing, oh, so I noticed, but nothing. It's noticing and investigating. What can it teach us? What can we learn from this? When we look at the mind, what can we learn from that? And it's sad, really sad to think that mindfulness might not. If you take mindfulness out of Buddhism, then there is there's a lot lost, because mindfulness is in a context, in a Buddhist context, it's part of the Eightfold Path. It's one of the 5 faculties, and it appears as one of the 5 powers. So it's found. It's one of the 7 factors of enlightenment. It doesn't ever appear on its own. It comes with other aspects of the Buddhist path. So it has a place as a context, and in the context of the Eightfold Path, it supports all the other factors, all the other parts. You can't practice sila well without mindfulness. So if you're not going to harm life, you have to start noticing life. You have to start noticing other people if you're not going to hurt them. You have to notice how what you say hurts if you're going to practice right speech. You have to start to notice when the mind tells you that you could just lie a little bit and it would be all right. That's what's happening. You have to bring mindfulness to bear to notice that. So you need mindfulness to practice sila. You need it to understand, to develop right view, right understanding. We have to see things clearly, but to see things clearly, we need to bring mindfulness to bear, because mindfulness precedes clarity. So mindfulness has a part to play in a bigger context in the Buddhist teaching. Yeah, but it is a cornerstone. There's no doubt about it. It's the cornerstone of Buddhist practice. waking up. The last words of the Buddha, wake up, is, wake up to the reality. It's be present. However you translate it, it comes out as something like mindfulness. Be mindful. Wake up. And it's so important to be present, be aware. So incredibly helpful. The language of now. The language of now comes with a willingness to let go. It comes with stillness, a stillness of mind. There's a stillness, a calmness there with mindfulness, because we're not chasing after anything. We're not trying to get anywhere. In the present moment, we're not going anywhere. We're just being present here and now. So there's a calming aspect to it. It's calming. One of the questions sometimes people ask, oh, do you have to calm the mind before you can be mindful? But if you practice mindfulness, then it's a natural calming of the mind. So they work together. There's not a first thing. You don't really have to wait until you cultivated an ability to be very calm before you can be mindful. But it doesn't mean that you can't benefit from cultivating calm. If you train the mind to calm down, then it becomes much easier to be mindful. But it's a mistake to think, I've got to do this before I can do that. I don't think there's anywhere in Buddhism that you'll see that you have to do this before you can do that. It's always working together. It's supporting this. This supports that. Sila supports samadhi, virtue supports concentration, it does. But when we're aware, when the mind becomes clear, then we can practice sila much better. With, as I said, with the ability to notice. When I was digging my allotment and I noticed worms, I was able to lay them to one side so as not to harm them. And that takes clarity and mindfulness, not just sila. It works together. There's nowhere you will find something that's the beginning. There's no first cause anywhere to be found. Everything begins and works together in tandem and is self-supporting. So we see that calm helps to mindfulness, but mindfulness helps calm. They work together. Anyway, I think I've talked enough, and I do think it's time for you to send me some questions. Maybe about the language of the mind. What about the language of the heart? What's that? I'm very interested in the language at the moment. It seems to be my thing. The language of all the senses, that's fascinating, isn't it? The language of the body is sensation. The language of the eye, the ear, the tongue, the nose. They've all got their own language. But the language of the mind is the most interesting one. If you have a question, if you put it in chat, I'll take a look at it. But do feel free to unmute if you'd like to ask a question. You can also do it like that.
Can I ask something quickly?
Yes, yes, please do, Marianne. Yeah.
Thank you. Easter time is coming up, and the Buddhist Society, I think, will reopen around the 19th or whatever. Are you advising people to carry on meditating every day, to take a few days off, or what is it?
Tell me that again. Can you just give me a bit more,
Yeah.
Marianne, what your thinking is? What do you think?
Uh, well, there are two sides. One is we can get attached to sitting as well, and the others way. And there is a third side. The other one is we don't sometimes really appreciate what it does to us until we stop, and then we see the effect, and then we want to go back. Whereas if we carry on, sometimes it can get even boring after a while. And say, where am I getting? You know, not am I really on the right path or whatever it is? And in generally speaking, giving ourselves some light moments as well, take time off, and might actually do us good every
Mm,
so often. What would your advice be?
yeah. Well, interesting. I've come across quite a lot of very interesting comments and discussions I've had with people recently who are struggling. Interestingly, we're coming out of lockdown, but they're struggling. And one person, they sent me a question, and I replied to their question. I gave them a Dhamma answer, and then and then I thought about it, and I thought, do you know, I think what they're saying is that they're angry with Buddhism. So I sent them like another answer, and I said, I think you're angry with Buddhism. And they replied and said, yes, that's what it is. They didn't know. And they'd been practicing. They'd used the lockdown to practice. They'd become quite intensive in their practice. Felt that suddenly they were just so angry with Buddhism. Actually, I think they were angry, just angry, angry. And so, what the Buddhas, we often, it's quite easy to put our anger on Buddhism and say, oh, I'm so angry with Buddhism, because Buddhism's a mirror, isn't it? What Buddhism is, it's like a mirror. And so it just reflects back. So if you're angry with Buddhism, you're angry. That's what it's telling you. Um, so, but it's interesting. I think that people are kind of frustrated, have been this build-up of frustration over a long time, and it can be that they've almost contained it with their Buddhist practice, and it could well be that it will come out. Another person who I was talking to, who said, I'm having a fortnight's holiday. They really needed a holiday, and they've been working very hard in the NHS, so they really needed a holiday, and they were having a week's holiday, 2 weeks holiday, and they said, and I'm not going to do any Buddhism. I need a holiday from Buddhism. Isn't it interesting? Then in a way, they just needed to just relax, just do nothing, and they felt better for it. So yeah, it's interesting. Well, what's my advice is um, to do what you feel is beneficial. If you, I don't think you should do what you feel is beneficial if it's harmful to other people. If you feel like screaming, you might want to have an inner scream rather than one that terrifies all the neighbors, but it still might be good. You might feel like that and feel like, really have an inner scream and feel better for it.
Thank you.
One of the things that can some people have felt, it can come up for all sorts of reasons, but that if they can have this thought, like, oh, if my Buddhist practice had really worked, I wouldn't feel this way, as though it's somehow let them down. It sometimes happens when something happens, like maybe a severe illness or some traumatic event, and they suddenly they feel like everything's falling apart. I mean, they then look at their Buddhist practice and think, oh, if I'd really benefited from my Buddhist practice, I would have been able to hold my mindfulness together. I'd been able to hold it together. And when that happened, when this terrible thing happened, I wouldn't have said that to that person. It wouldn't have happened. And they feel let down by their Buddhist practice. That can happen. And what can you say? I mean, I've heard people say that to me, and what can you say? Well, just keep on. What can you do? Just keep noticing, being present, being aware, notice, in not non-judgmental, not critical, because that is the only way to practice. There is no other way than the non-judgmental mind. Non-judgmental awareness is just what it is. That doesn't mean you've failed when you're judgmental. It just means not being judgmental about it. So really, I think what happens is we feel like we need an escape. One way of escaping is to have doubt. You can escape into doubt, thinking that it's a kind of resistance, because the practice it takes you into an uncomfortable place, while the most uncomfortable places is to actually face reality. It can be very uncomfortable. And ultimately, the reality of dying, to really be willing to die before you die, which is what, if you read Ajahn Chah, you'd hear him talk about die. He would say to people coming to the monastery, have you come here to die? And they say, no, I haven't come here to die. No, yeah, this is the place to die. And people would be frightened by that. But he didn't mean that they had to come to die, but he was talking about dying to the grasping mind, dying to greed, hatred, and delusion. It's a being willing to die is a frightening thing. The self wants to be born. It wants to be born. It doesn't want to die. That's why I say that when we notice this next, is we're continually born into the future, because we're desperate. That's what the mind's is doing this. The mind's doing this because it thinks that's what we want. It's trying to help. But it's not helping, because we're continually being trapped in dukkha. We've been born into disappointment. It's a future, all right. It's true, it's a future, but if it comes with attachment, then there's a disappointment built in. There's the seed of disappointment right there. So however we want it to be, it will. If it's dependent, if our happiness is dependent on conditions, inevitably, when those conditions change, we'll suffer. So if we're born into the conditioned realm with attachment, then inevitably suffering will happen. It can't be otherwise. So that's why there's no ultimate release from that in being born. But if our happiness isn't dependent on conditions, then there's freedom. We don't. So how could it be? What is that? How could it? What could? What is that? That experience, that state of mind where your happiness isn't dependent on conditions. That, in a way, I think you have to find out for yourself. You have to experience that for yourself. It's really worth investigating. What could that be? When you look at all the suttas, if you look at any of them, the suttas, if you look at say the Dhammacakka, the Pavatana Sutta, the first sermon, or the fire sermon, and if you take the Anattalatthika Sutta, the main suttas, if you look at the suttas, you find what's recurring. There are two things that recur in the suttas that are most common and found. One is the beginning and one is the end. The beginning and the end of suttas are very often very standardized. They are the same. They generally start with Evam Me Sutang. This is what I heard. There's a common thing because they've been passed on through an oral tradition. So this is what I heard. So Evam Me Suttam is the beginning of the sutta. But at the end of suttas, if you take the fire sermon, for example, it talks about dispassion. It's the experience of dispassion, of disenchantment, of cessation. And so that's the ending. The direction of travel is away from being enchanted by the world. It's through it. We're heading towards disenchantment. So in a sense, it's not being taken in, isn't it? That's the delusion that keeps taking us in. That's the enchantment of the world. And disenchantment is not, feeling disenchanted. You think, oh, that's horrible. Feeling disenchanted, that would be a terrible thing. But in Buddhism, actually, it's a direction of travel. This is realization comes with disenchantment because you're not enchanted by the grasping mind, by the world. And dispassion is the next thing. So not being, letting go of the passion for the sense realm. Now that sounds like you wouldn't be passionate in life, and we want to be passionate, don't we? We want to be passionate because that's what's life without passion. You could say that, but I don't want to disappoint you, but there is, we're talking about the being born, this kind of passion that to be born into things the whole time. There's no end to our suffering if we're continually being born into things. It's a bit like the person who's being divorced, but they keep getting married. And they're getting married over and over again. They keep getting divorced and married again. Well, haven't you learnt yet? That's what we're heading towards, understanding and seeing things as they are. Oh, I think I've got a question. Somebody wanted to know what the question was. I didn't answer the last time I was doing this 2 weeks ago. And unfortunately, I don't get to keep the questions. They disappear when the chat goes. There was a question I didn't answer at the end because there wasn't time. I don't remember it. But if anyone's here that can remember asking that question, then there's somebody who's really curious to know what it was. So if you're not quick, I won't have time to answer it again. So it's really interesting to look at the beginning and end of suttas. Have a look and see if you can find that common thread. Take a look at the fire sermon, listen, and how does it go? Probably can't remember exactly. Because the fire sermon's about not being enchanted by the senses. Well, everything is burning, isn't it? So that the eye is burning with visual contact, burning with objects, visual contact, visual consciousness. The ear is burning with sound, burning with auditory impression, sound. The tongue's burning with taste. The mind's burning with ideas, burning with the greed, hatred, and delusion, burning with birth, aging, and death, it's burning with sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. And when we understand this, when we see it clearly, then we become disenchanted with the world, disenchanted, dispassionate.
Could we say that if the practice is done properly, you don't need to take a holiday from the practice. It is only when I practice that I get in a tight corner, and then I need to take a holiday from it.
But it's no. But there, maybe not. But actually, I suspect that it does us good to take a bit of a holiday from the practice. I don't. You know, in fact, this morning, I slept in for half an hour. I didn't mean to, but it just happened that way. Maybe I needed to take a bit of a holiday from the practice. Who knows? It didn't worry me, it didn't bother me, but it was an interesting thing. Oh, the suttas. Well, if you go to the Amaravati website, somebody asked, where can you find the suttas? And if you visit the Amaravati website, then you can come to the chanting book. Like I've been sharing, I don't know why I wouldn't think of sharing the fire sermon. It's all in Pali, but you can get the, if you go, a good website is oh dear.
Sutta Central.
What was it? What is look at?
There is a Sutta Central, which was got
Sutta Central is very good. Access to Insight's very good. That's a very good website. So do take a look at those websites. Yeah, thank you. Mark's mentioned it. And somebody else, Liam. Yeah, do please take a look. There's some very good translations of the suttas. Have a look at the fire sermon, see what it has to say. It's a very interesting one, very simple. There are many suttas, quite short ones, some quite long. But the key for looking at the suttas, as with any teaching, anything, is just to take what's useful and leave aside what isn't. And even then, to just take one small theme, like say, like out of what I've said this evening, if you were to just take the idea, the possibility of using a little mantra like, oh, and next, as a way of investigating the mind. So when the mind's telling you the stories, you don't even notice it's telling you stories. Just ask it, and next, and you think, oh, I'm telling myself a story. It's a story. I'm making it up. And you'll see what that does. Just experiment with that. You can, and then you can follow it with and now. So you do and next, and then and now. So and next, you think, yeah, okay, let go. And now. And this is the experience. This is the present moment. So this is really helpful, because a lot of people ask the question, what is mindfulness? Well, try doing it. Try and next and now. Because when you understand what's next, what's this, the mind that's carried away with next is, you know what now is. You understand things by opposites, don't we? You can't really, you don't know what mindfulness is. How can you know what mindfulness is? But you understand black from white, white from black. You don't get white, but you understand it when you get dark. You don't understand it without. So we understand things that way. So just experiment, and next, and now. And just think, oh, this is what mindfulness is. This is being in the present moment. So if you take that one thing away, then, or whatever it is, just one small thing can be enough to practice and investigate and learn. You can learn a lot. Whereas, if you worry because, I don't think I can agree with what Martin said about this, then you're not really using the teaching well. You're just making life difficult for yourself. Although it can be rewarding to investigate that way. So as another way to investigate, when you hear something that you don't like to hear, then ask, what's that about? So that's another way to investigate. So you can use the mantra, what's that about? Then just keep investigating, what's that about? When you hear what you don't like, what's that about? Because it will teach you something. You'll learn about your resistance to that. You'll learn from that. So as it's Easter, you've got the opportunity to have a holiday or to practice. And I think you should try both. Investigate and see what happens. And we reconvene on the 19th, I think. It's the Monday, it's the 19th, I hope. And so I got a nod from Mariano, he knows. So thank you all for coming this evening. It's been very nice. And gosh, I hope you'll store up lots of good questions over Easter. You can write them down, and then I'll look forward to hearing them when we come back. I'll finish with a closing homage. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, I render homage to the Buddha, the blessed one. The teaching, so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. So, bye-bye everyone. Have a good Easter. And
Bye-bye. Thank you.